There's a paradox that destroys most people who try to learn something new. They want to be creative. They want to innovate. They want to do things their own way. So they skip the fundamentals. They ignore the basics. They convince themselves that copying others is beneath them, that true mastery comes from originality, from expressing their unique perspective right from the start. And then they wonder why, after months or years of effort, they're still mediocre, still struggling with the same problems, still watching others who started after them somehow surpass them with what looks like effortless skill. The truth is brutal, and most people never accept it. You cannot innovate what you have not mastered. You cannot break rules you do not understand. You cannot create your own path until you have walked the paths of those who came before you. And the moment you try to skip that process, the moment you prioritize your ego over your evolution, you guarantee your own failure. In 1605, a young Miyamoto Musashi stood before his teacher, frustrated and angry. He had been practicing the same sword technique for 3 months. The same movement, the same stance, the same strike, over and over and over. His hands were calloused. His body was exhausted. His mind was screaming for something new, something different, something that felt like progress. He approached his teacher and said, "I understand this technique now. Teach me the next one." His teacher looked at him for a long moment, then picked up a wooden sword and executed the same movement Musashi thought he had mastered. But when the teacher did it, the sword seemed to move through the air differently. The power came from places Musashi had not even noticed. The subtlety, the control, the absolute precision made Musashi's version look like a child's imitation. His teacher said nothing. He simply handed the sword back and walked away. Musashi understood. He had not mastered anything. He had merely memorized movements. And he spent another year practicing that single technique before his teacher acknowledged he was ready to move forward. That moment changed everything for Musashi. It revealed to him a principle that would not only make him the greatest swordsman in Japanese history, but would influence Japanese arts, crafts, and disciplines for the next 400 years. That principle is called Shuhari. 3 stages of mastery that everyone must pass through, no shortcuts allowed, no exceptions permitted. And here's what nobody tells you about Shuhari. It's not just a learning method. It's a complete destruction and reconstruction of your identity. It's a systematic way to kill the arrogant beginner inside you and birth the humble master you're capable of becoming. Most people never make it past the first stage. Not because they lack talent. Not because they lack dedication. But because their ego kills them before transformation can begin. Before I break down exactly what these 3 stages are and how you can use them to learn anything 10 times faster than everyone around you, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel and hit that like button right now. Not later. Not after you see if this is good. Because what I'm about to share with you is not theory. It's a system that has been tested and proven for centuries. A system that separates those who talk about mastery from those who achieve it. And I want you to drop a comment telling me one skill, one discipline, one area of your life where you're currently stuck. Where you've been practicing but not progressing. Where you feel like you're spinning your wheels and getting nowhere. Write it down. Because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why you're stuck and exactly how to break through. Let's begin. The first stage of Shuhari is called Shu, and it translates to obey or protect the form. This is the stage where your job is simple. Shut up and copy. That's it. Find someone who has mastered what you want to learn and replicate everything they do with 0 deviation, 0 creativity, 0 personal input. Your opinion does not matter. Your preferences do not matter. Your desire to do things your own way does not matter. In Shu, you are not a creator. You are a copying machine. And the quality of your future mastery depends entirely on how perfectly you can execute this stage. Most modern learners fail here immediately because this idea offends them. They've been told their whole lives that they're special, that they're unique, that their perspective matters. And all of that might be true eventually. But in Shu, it's poison. In Shu, your specialness is your enemy. Your uniqueness is your obstacle. Your perspective is your limitation. When Musashi trained under his teacher, he did not question the methods. He did not suggest improvements. He did not ask why they were doing things a certain way. He simply obeyed. When his teacher told him to strike from a specific angle, he struck from that angle. When his teacher told him to hold his stance for an hour without moving, he held it. When his teacher demonstrated a movement, Musashi replicated it so precisely that from a distance you could not tell them apart. This is not mindless repetition. This is conscious submission to a proven system. This is the recognition that someone who has spent decades mastering something understands details that you as a beginner cannot even perceive yet. They see the invisible. They feel the unfelt. They know the unknown. And your job in Shu is not to understand why. Your job is to trust and replicate until your body knows these movements so deeply that they become unconscious. Here's what happens in your brain during Shu that modern education completely ignores. When you perfectly replicate an expert's technique over and over, you're not just learning movements. You're downloading their neural patterns. You're building the same pathways in your brain that they built in theirs. You're encoding not just the what but the how and eventually the why at a level deeper than conscious understanding. This is why traditional Japanese arts spend years on basics. This is why martial artists repeat the same kata thousands of times. This is why musicians drill scales until their fingers move automatically. They understand something that instant gratification culture has forgotten. Mastery is not built on creativity. Mastery is built on perfect imitation that eventually becomes so natural, so effortless, so deeply embedded that it disappears into your unconscious competence. But here's where most people sabotage themselves in Shu. They do the technique, but they do it their way. They learn the basics, but they add their own flair. They follow the system, but they make little adjustments because they think they know better. And every single one of those adjustments is a leak. Every deviation is a crack in the foundation. Every personal touch is a guarantee that you will never reach the level of mastery you're capable of. Because you're not learning the technique. You're learning your interpretation of the technique. And your interpretation as a beginner is always, without exception, inferior to the master's original. Let me give you a modern example that will make this clear. There's a software engineer I know who spent 5 years trying to become great at programming. He read books, watched tutorials, built projects. But he always added his own twist. He always found a way to do things that felt more intuitive to him. He convinced himself he was learning faster by adapting everything to his personal style. 5 years later, he was still mediocre. Then he joined a company where he was forced to follow their exact coding standards, their exact architecture patterns, their exact way of solving problems. No deviation allowed. For the first time in his life, he was in pure Shu. And within 6 months, he learned more than he had in the previous 5 years. Why? Because he finally stopped fighting the learning process with his ego. He finally surrendered to proven patterns. He finally allowed mastery to be imprinted on him instead of trying to imprint himself onto mastery. And right here, I need to pause for a second and ask you something. Something I genuinely want to know. Because I can see the view count on this video, and I know thousands of people are watching this right now. But what I don't know is your story. What skill have you been trying to learn where you keep hitting a wall? Is it a language that you've been studying for years but still can't speak fluently? Is it a business you keep trying to build but it never quite takes off? Is it a physical skill like playing an instrument or a sport where you feel like you've plateaued? Whatever it is, I want you to go to the comments right now and type this exact phrase. I've been stuck learning, and then finish that sentence. Just one sentence. That's it. It could be, I've been stuck learning Spanish for 3 years. Or, I've been stuck learning how to trade stocks profitably. Or, I've been stuck learning how to write in a way that people actually want to read. Whatever it is, write it down. Because here's what's going to happen. First, you're going to see other people who wrote almost the exact same thing you did. And you're going to realize this struggle is universal. You're not uniquely bad at learning. You're just using the wrong system. Second, your comment is going to help someone else who's struggling with the same thing feel less alone. And third, I read every comment, and I'm going to use the most common challenges to create future videos that directly address your specific obstacles. So do it now. Scroll down. Type, I've been stuck learning, finish the sentence, and hit post. Your struggle today could become your breakthrough tomorrow. I'll wait. Now let's talk about the second stage of Shuhari. It's called Ha, which means to break or to detach from the form. This is where most people think mastery begins. This is where they think creativity enters. But here's what they miss. You can only enter Ha after you have completely exhausted Shu. After you have internalized the fundamentals so deeply that you can execute them perfectly without conscious thought. After you have earned the right to experiment through thousands of hours of perfect replication. Ha is not rebellion. Ha is evolution. In Ha, you begin to understand why the forms exist. You begin to see the principles underneath the techniques. You begin to recognize that your teacher's method was not the only way but one expression of deeper truths. And now, with those truths embedded in your unconscious, you can begin to explore variations. You can begin to adapt. You can begin to find what works specifically for your body, your mind, your circumstances. When Musashi entered Ha, something remarkable happened. He started arriving late to duels. He started using unconventional weapons. He started breaking every rule of traditional swordsmanship. But here's the critical part that people miss when they hear these stories. Musashi could only break the rules because he had mastered them first. He understood the principles so deeply that he could see which rules were essential and which were cultural decoration. He knew the fundamentals so perfectly that he could improvise in the moment because his body and mind were operating from a foundation of 10,000 hours of pure Shu. When he showed up late to face Sasaki Kojiro in the most famous duel in Japanese history, that was not disrespect. That was strategy. He understood that a master swordsman's greatest weapon is not his technique. It's his mind. And by arriving late, he shattered Kojiro's mental equilibrium before the fight even began. That's Ha. Using the principles you learned in Shu in ways your teacher never explicitly taught but would recognize as legitimate expressions of the art. Most people try to jump straight to Ha. They see a master breaking rules and think, I can do that too. But they cannot. Because they do not have the foundation. They're like a person who sees a jazz musician improvising and thinks they can improvise too, forgetting that the jazz musician spent 10 years learning scales, chord progressions, and classical pieces before they earned the right to break free. They're like someone who sees a poet breaking grammar rules to create beauty and thinks they can do the same, forgetting that the poet first learned to write with perfect grammar so they would know exactly which rules to break and when. Ha is not freedom from the fundamentals. Ha is freedom through the fundamentals. It's the stage where the rules become guidelines, where the techniques become vocabulary, where the forms become raw material for your personal expression. Here's a practical example of what Ha looks like in modern life. There's a writer I mentored who spent 2 years in pure Shu. She read the masters. She copied their sentence structures. She replicated their techniques in her own work. She wrote like Hemingway for 3 months. Then she wrote like Toni Morrison for 3 months. Then she wrote like David Foster Wallace. She did not add her own voice. She did not try to be original. She just learned to execute different styles with precision. And people told her she was wasting her time. They said, find your own voice. They said, be authentic. They said, stop copying. But she understood Shuhari. She knew that you cannot have your own voice until you have learned to speak in many voices. After 2 years, something shifted. She entered Ha. Suddenly, her writing had elements of all the masters she had studied, but it was undeniably hers. She could write a scene with Hemingway's precision, Morrison's imagery, and Wallace's complexity, but it emerged as something new. Something that could only come from her. That's Ha. Not abandoning what you learned in Shu. Integrating it so completely that it transforms into something personal. But Ha comes with a dangerous trap that destroys many promising students. They taste a little freedom, a little creativity, a little success with their variations, and they think they've arrived. They think they're masters now. They stop learning. They stop refining. They coast on their moderate success and wonder why they never become truly great. They've mistaken Ha for the destination when it's actually just the second stage of a 3-stage journey. Because there's one more transformation waiting. One more death of self. One more level that separates the good from the legendary. And most people never reach it because they think Ha is enough. They settle for being interesting when they could have been essential. They settle for being skilled when they could have been transcendent. This is where Ri enters. The third stage of Shuhari. Ri means to leave or to separate. But this is not separation from the art. This is separation from all forms, all techniques, all conscious effort. Ri is the stage where you become the art itself, where there is no difference between you and the discipline, where your actions flow not from technique but from a deeper understanding that transcends technique. In Ri, you're not following rules or breaking rules. You're not copying masters or improvising variations. You're simply responding to reality with perfect appropriateness because you have internalized the essence of the discipline so deeply that it operates through you automatically. You've moved beyond skill into something that looks like instinct but is actually the highest form of mastery. Musashi achieved Ri late in his life. And when he did, his approach to swordsmanship changed completely. He stopped teaching techniques. He stopped focusing on stances or strikes or strategies. Instead, he taught principles that applied to everything. He taught about perceiving reality without distortion. He taught about acting without hesitation. He taught about the state he called mushin, or no mind, where the swordsman responds to the opponent without conscious thought, where the gap between perception and action disappears entirely. In Ri, Musashi was not a swordsman anymore. He was strategy itself. He was awareness itself. He was action itself. The techniques he had drilled for decades in Shu had dissolved into his being so completely that they were no longer techniques. They were just the way he existed in the world. Here's what Ri looks like in a way you can understand. Think about walking. When you were a baby, learning to walk was Shu. You watched others. You tried to replicate their movements. You fell constantly. You consciously thought about every step. Then you entered Ha. You could walk, but you experimented. You tried walking backwards, walking on your toes, walking in different rhythms. You adapted walking to different terrains and situations. But now, as an adult, you're in Ri with walking. You don't think about walking. You don't consciously adjust your gait for different surfaces. You don't plan your steps. You simply move, and your body handles all the complexity automatically. That's Ri. The discipline has become so integrated into who you are that it's no longer something you do. It's something you are. But here's the profound part that most people never grasp about Ri. Once you achieve Ri in one discipline, it changes how you learn everything else. Because you've internalized the process of mastery itself. You've learned how to learn. You understand in your bones that Shu comes first, always, no matter how much your ego protests. You trust the process of perfect replication even when it feels repetitive and boring. You recognize the signs that you're ready for Ha. You know the difference between true mastery and mere competence. And you can apply this meta-skill to any new discipline you approach. This is why you see masters in one field often becoming masters in other fields later in life. It's not because they're talented at everything. It's because they've mastered the art of mastery itself. Musashi demonstrated this repeatedly. He became not just a master swordsman but a master calligrapher, a master painter, a master sculptor, a master strategist. How? Because after achieving Ri in swordsmanship, he understood that the path was the same for everything else. Enter Shu with humility. Progress to Ha with wisdom. Arrive at Ri through complete integration. Every discipline follows the same pattern because mastery itself follows the same pattern. The specific skills change. The fundamental process does not. And once you internalize this, once you truly understand Shuhari not as a concept but as a lived experience, you can learn anything 10 times faster than someone who's still fighting the process with their ego. Now let's get practical. How do you actually apply Shuhari to something you want to learn right now? First, you need to be honest about which stage you're actually in. Most people think they're in Ha when they're still early in Shu. They've learned a few techniques, seen a few patterns, and they're already trying to innovate. Stop. If you cannot execute the fundamentals with perfect consistency, you are still in Shu. Period. No negotiation. And your only job in Shu is to find the best practitioner you can access and copy everything they do with obsessive precision. Not the parts that feel comfortable. Not the parts that make sense to you. Everything. If you're learning a language, this means copying native speakers exactly. Their pronunciation, their rhythm, their expressions, their grammar patterns, even when it feels unnatural. If you're learning business, this means finding a successful business in your field and modeling their systems, their processes, their strategies exactly before you try to innovate. If you're learning a physical skill, this means drilling the fundamental movements exactly as taught, even when your body wants to do it slightly differently. Second, you need to measure your progress by replication quality, not by personal satisfaction. In Shu, feeling good about your practice means nothing. The only measure that matters is how closely you can replicate the master's execution. Record yourself. Compare it to the expert. Be brutally honest about the differences. Then fix those differences with focused practice. Repeat until the gap closes. This is not fun. This is not creative. This is the price of admission to real mastery. And if you're not willing to pay it, you're not willing to become truly great. You're willing to be mediocre with flair. That's fine. Just be honest about it. Third, you need to recognize the signs that you're ready to transition from Shu to Ha. The primary sign is unconscious competence. You can execute the fundamentals perfectly without thinking about them. Your body knows them. Your mind knows them. They've become automatic. The secondary sign is that you start to see patterns the master never explicitly taught. You understand why certain techniques work. You recognize the principles underneath the forms. You can explain to someone else not just what to do but why it works. When both of these signs appear consistently, you've earned access to Ha. Not before. In Ha, your practice changes. You're no longer copying exactly. You're experimenting within boundaries. You try variations. You test principles in new contexts. You adapt techniques to your specific circumstances. But here's the critical part. You're not throwing away what you learned in Shu. You're building on it. You're using it as vocabulary to create new sentences. Every experiment is grounded in solid fundamentals. Every variation is still recognizably related to the original forms. You're breaking rules consciously and strategically, not randomly and rebelliously. And you're still learning from masters, but now you're learning from multiple masters. You're synthesizing different approaches because you understand the underlying principles well enough to see how they connect. The transition from Ha to Ri is not something you can force or plan. Ri emerges naturally after years of practice when the discipline has been so thoroughly integrated that it becomes part of your identity. You'll know you're approaching Ri when you stop thinking about the discipline as something separate from yourself. When someone asks how you do what you do and you struggle to explain because it feels as natural as breathing. When you can perform at your highest level while simultaneously aware of everything around you, not narrowly focused but broadly present. When the quality of your execution remains consistent regardless of external conditions because you're not relying on favorable circumstances or peak mental states. That's Ri. And it takes as long as it takes. Rushing it guarantees you'll never reach it. But here's something crucial I need you to understand about Shuhari that nobody talks about. This is not a linear path where you complete Shu, then complete Ha, then complete Ri, and you're done. Every time you add a new dimension to your discipline, every time you face a new challenge, every time you elevate your standards, you cycle through all three stages again at a higher level. Musashi never stopped returning to Shu. Even as a master, he would isolate himself and drill fundamentals for months. Why? Because he understood that mastery is not a destination. It's a spiral. You keep returning to the beginning, but each time you return, you're operating at a higher level of understanding. This is the secret that keeps masters humble. This is the insight that prevents stagnation. This is the wisdom that allows continuous growth even after decades of practice. So where does this leave you? You're watching this video because you want to get better at something. You want to learn faster, master deeper, achieve more. And now you have the framework. The question is, are you willing to submit to it? Are you willing to enter Shu with genuine humility? Are you willing to copy without complaint? Are you willing to delay your creativity, postpone your originality, silence your ego long enough to build a foundation that can support the weight of true mastery? Because here's the truth. Shuhari works. It has worked for centuries. It has produced masters in every discipline imaginable. But it requires something most modern learners are unwilling to give. It requires patience. It requires trust. It requires the death of your beginner's arrogance and the birth of a student's mind. Most people will watch this video, nod along, agree with the concepts, and then go back to doing things their own way. They'll keep dabbling. They'll keep experimenting without foundation. They'll keep wondering why they never break through. And a small number of people, maybe you, will actually do it. Will actually find a master to copy. Will actually submit to Shu without deviation. Will actually build the foundation that makes everything else possible. Years from now, there will be two versions of your future self. One version never really committed to Shuhari. They learned some things, achieved moderate success, but always felt like they were capable of more. They look at true masters with a mixture of admiration and regret, wondering what they could have been if they had just been willing to do what was necessary. The other version embraced Shuhari completely. They endured the boredom of Shu. They earned the creativity of Ha. They arrived at the transcendence of Ri. And now they're the person others look at with that same mixture of admiration and regret. They're the one who makes it look easy because they paid the price to make it become easy. Which version of yourself are you creating right now? Which version will you meet in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? The choice is not complicated. It's just uncomfortable. And that discomfort is exactly what separates those who talk about mastery from those who achieve it. If you made it this far, you're different from most people. You're someone who's actually serious about transformation, not just interested in it. So I need you to do something right now that will make this real instead of just another video you watched and forgot. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Not because I need the subscribers, but because you need the reminders. Every video I release is designed to give you one more tool, one more principle, one more system that moves you closer to mastery. And I want you to comment right now telling me exactly what skill you're going to apply Shuhari to and who you're going to model in the Shu stage. Be specific. Write it down. Make it real. It could be, I'm going to apply Shuhari to learning piano, and I'm going to model Glenn Gould's technique. Or I'm going to apply Shuhari to building my business, and I'm going to model exactly how Ryan Holiday launches his books. Whatever it is, write it down. Because when you declare it publicly, when you make it visible, when you commit not just to yourself but to this community, something changes. The path becomes real. The commitment becomes binding. And 6 months from now, when you've made progress that seemed impossible today, you'll come back to that comment and realize that this was the moment everything shifted. So do it now. Subscribe, bell, comment, and let's walk this path of mastery together. Thank you for your attention. Now go become someone that your current self wouldn't recognize.